Morning, good afternoon, good evening. In one of your recent posting, my sister Lynnet said something that is profound, that I think we must pause and think about seriously. In a posting, she talked about why Zimbabwe is failing to build strong institutions, align its laws with the constitution, and how everybody is worried about who is going to be the next president. And yet all these things are left undone. And worse still, whoever becomes the president under those conditions will just be what we have been fighting to end, another dictator. Because they've got so much power. I think one of the reasons why this is happening is that most of our would-be leaders, as much as they appreciate the importance of rule of law, the importance of strong democratic institutions, whilst they are aspiring for power, as they get nearer to it, the edge to create rule of law, democratic institutions seem to evaporate like mist under the African sun. Something else kicks in. This primeval dominate or be dominated mentality. And it can become so powerful, it is irresistible. The call of the wild. In 1980, or by the time we get into 1980, Robert Mugabe and his fellow ZANU-PF leaders realized that power was within their grasp. The thought of losing it was unthinkable. And so they became so obsessed about it that they did not even hesitate for a minute to brush aside one of the very principles of the liberation war: one man, one vote. The prospect of having a democratic election in which they lose was unthinkable. So they did not hesitate to announce that if the party loses, the Bush war would continue. And the ordinary people, when you're looking up the business end of an AK-47 rifle, you do not argue. You do as you are told. And so the people voted to end the Bush war. And alas, the people lost their right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. Because as much as they thought they'd voted to end the war actually did not end. Because 3 years after independence, the nation was dragged into one of the worst nightmares in our history, the Gukurahundi massacre. The principal driving force behind Gukurahundi was to force PF ZAPU, the only other real political challenge to ZANU-PF, to give up their independence as an independent party and join up with ZANU-PF. And in 1987, the late Dr. Joshua Nkomo signed the Unity Accords. And that paved the way for Mugabe to impose the de facto one-party state that has ruled the country to this day. Ever since, the country has had a number of opportunities to end the ZANU-PF one-party dictatorship. The best chance came in the GNU of 2008 to 2018. The day Morgan Tsvangirai was sworn in as Prime Minister, I think it was 9th February 2009, you could see that the man Tsvangirai was transformed. He was now a god. His elevation made him feel that he has made it. And so did the rest of his MDC friends. There's no doubt that they knew the primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms which would have rebuilt the country's institutions, like the police, the army, the judiciary, making them independent and therefore relevant to the nation. But Mugabe bribed them with the trappings of high office. And with their snouts in the feeding trough, they all but forgot about the democratic reforms. Not even one token reform was implemented in 5 years of the GNU. Indeed, one of the reasons why Morgan Tsvangirai and company failed to implement even one reform is that they believed they were so popular they would win the elections even without the reforms. The irony is their followers believed it too. And so even the leaders and the followers fell into the trap of this strong man mentality. And unfortunately, it's a weakness that has been exploited by the opposition again and again. In 2023, Nelson Chamisa told his followers that he had plugged the vote rigging loopholes. Triple C was going to win big. It was an acknowledgement that ZANU-PF was rigging the elections. But instead of building strong institutions to make sure that they don't rig, they preferred to plug them. What is so ironic is that they accepted the need for SADC in the AU and all the other election observers. One has got to ask, what is it exactly you expected the observers to observe? How effectively you have plugged the vote rigging loopholes? Because they are not there to observe that. They are there to observe whether the election process has been carried out in accordance with the country's constitution and SADC's own principles and guidelines on the holding of free and fair elections. And that is the basis on which they will judge the elections. But for some reason, for some strange reason, Nelson Chamisa and his followers expected SADC and the AU to, at the end of the day, pronounce Chamisa the winner, even if the election result was such that the process itself was flawed. Doesn't matter. It's the winning that matters. So it became totally meaningless. Of course, SADC and the AU denounced those election processes as flawed because they were flawed. We failed to meet our own constitutional requirements, our own electoral act requirements. We failed to meet SADC's principles and guidelines. So the result would have been the process is flawed and therefore then illegitimate. The other argument that Lynnet is highlighting here is that this is just an endless cycle. If you accept flawed electoral processes, once the people whom you have elected gets into power, they are likely to exploit the same weaknesses in the law and in the democratic institutions, and thus make them the devil that you are at the present moment fighting against. After 45 years of rigged elections, it really beggars belief that we should be arguing on whether or not we need to implement reforms so that we have got free, fair, and credible elections. This is something that we should not be arguing about, and yet here we are. At the present moment, the big issue on the nation's agenda is this of Mnangagwa trying to amend the constitution so that he could stay in power beyond the 2-term limits. Let me say from the outside, Mnangagwa rigged the 2023 elections. SADC and the AU election observers condemned the election process as such. He, not surprising, dismissed their reports with his usual contempt. Deja vu. Well, the truth is, it's not SADC's problem. It is our problem. And he is our problem. And he is insisting on rigging elections is at the heart of why Zimbabwe is a failed state.
Vana vakatuka ZANU-PF kana ini ndonyanyisa kufara kuita zvakanaka. Ukavona vavengi vako vachikurumbidza nekuchikanganisa, ukavona vachiti ZANU-PF yakaipa, farai, because you are doing correct things for your country. Hongu takaita maelections edu, kuna vamwe vaitaura zvisina musoro zvikanzi maelections anafamba zvakanaka, ndezvavo.
The failure to hold free, fair, and credible election is our problem. That is why we are in this mess. At the present moment, he is hell-bent on amending the constitution so that the 2028 elections can be postponed. And this will give him a loophole to stay in power a further 2 years beyond his 2-term limits. It is ironic that he is illegitimate and now he is seeking to amend the constitution to extend his stay in power. The people of Zimbabwe are tempted to get involved in this whole saga. What people must understand is that this is taking their attention away from what they should be looking at, i.e., that there must be democratic reforms to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. And also that it is sheer futility to keep participating in an election process that is so flawed, so illegal. You cannot win it, but if you participate, you give the process legitimacy. This has been at the heart of Zimbabwe's politics and our failings. When you participate in a flawed process, then SADC and the AU will step aside. As much as they can say, no, the process was flawed, they're not going to do anything else because you participated believing you could win flawed processes. The referendum will be held under the same condition as the 2023 elections. In other words, ZANU-PF will blatantly rig the referendum. So if you participate and ZANU-PF rigs, you will have given the result legitimacy. That we must avoid. We should not be engrossed in the referendum itself, or what Mnangagwa is trying to achieve. We should focus purely that the process, whatever it is, be it the election or referendum, is so flawed, we do not want to participate in it. Because we are being exploited. We will not achieve anything from it. What we should be focused on is the need to end this endless cycle of meaningless electoral processes, that produce nothing. We should focus on the need for the rule of law, for strong democratic institutions, and not be tempted to settle for anything else. That is where we should be focused on. We are not going to achieve anything by participating or getting ourselves involved in this factional war that is happening in ZANU-PF. And one more thing about ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF are like baboons. Well, they quarrel constantly, continuously, all day and all night among themselves. But when they face a common enemy, they are united. ZANU-PF from both factions, they know that as long as the other people in the other faction have got power, their own position is protected. Look what happened to G40. G40, yes, some of them, like Kasukuwere, had to go into exile and so forth. But if there'd been a regime change in Zimbabwe, I think, and it is a competent one, I think they will know that people like Kasukuwere will be asked, "You are living in South Africa. From what?" Grace Mugabe, she spends more time in Dubai, living in a mansion. How did you pay for it? And so she is, as much as she would have wanted to remain in power, she is also appreciative that it is another ZANU-PF faction that is in power, that has allowed them to keep their loot. Whichever ZANU-PF faction wins this present tug of war that is going on, we can be rest assured that they would not want to dismantle the ZANU-PF dictatorship itself. And yet that is what we are after. As long as we've got the ZANU-PF dictatorship, we will never have strong democratic institutions. Because it is the corrupt police, corrupt judiciary, corrupt ZEC, etc., that is helping to keep ZANU-PF in power. And if we are serious about wanting to reform that, both factions of ZANU-PF will consider those people the common enemy, making it impossible for you to change it. Thank you very much. Have a good day.